would literally prey on us poor unsuspected interns to get a chance to make us buy their products. And we were naive enough that we would actually listen to them until we figured out we literally had to hide from them, which basically, when we'd see them coming, we'd hide in the bathroom. So that was my only experience with sales rep. And to be honest, when my boss told me, you're going to be a sales rep, I was actually mortified, like mortified. So that's how I started in sales. Now, do I go on to how I got into retail from there, or?
Well, how did you get in? So you did that. So how did you get into retail? Because I'm interested to know how you got here. You were in pharmaceutical sales, but like, how did you end up with L'Occitane?
Okay, so I got into retail business development for this pharmaceutical company, which sold products that nobody wanted to buy. They were homeopathic products. So you have to go back 25 years, right, when most people were like, no way, I'm not buying homeopathic products. So I'm not going to go in how I managed to get them to buy them, because it's a question you're going to ask me later. Yeah. But I basically did so well in that company that they promoted me and sent me to BC to run the entire Western division for the company. And when I was in BC, one of my biggest clients became my husband. And he was a retailer, but in the pharmacy business. And during my 2 pregnancies, I was bored to tears. So what would I do? I would poke my nose into his business until he gave me one of his pharmacies to totally transform into a health center. Wow. And in that pharmacy, I brought in L'Occitane. Why L'Occitane? Because it was my little piece of France. My grandmother on my dad's side was Occitan. She was from Provence. She spoke the dialect. So it was my little emotional thing to France. And within 3 months of bringing it into the pharmacy, I figured that L'Occitane was way more fun than the pharmacy business, and decided to go and launch my own store. I had never done retail in my life. I had no clue how to run a retail store. But from one day to the next, I decided I'm going to open a retail store. And that's how I got into retail.
I absolutely love that, because I think so many of us can relate to falling into retail, however that happened. Whether it was you got a part-time job and then all of a sudden 10 years later, you're like, how did that happen? I'm still here. Because that was my story 25 years ago. And your story of falling into retail was a different journey, but you still kind of fell into it in a sense of like that whole pharmaceutical sales, and then I'm going to open a store, which is fascinating to me, because I never actually knew that that was how L'Occitane started in Canada. I had no knowledge of that.
It's a fun story, and it was, to be honest, it's a great journey. And yeah, I discovered retail entirely per chance, but it's a business that actually suits me a lot. My medical background, made me really, I have a lot of empathy for people. I love caring for people. And, there's a lot of things in retail, you're going to be surprised, that are quite similar to the medical field. But
right. And like, I love the story that you always tell me about the hand cream. Because like, it's one of those stories that we're always in retail trying to figure out how to drive sales, how to drive results. And we will be doing this when we go back, because we have a lot of catch up to do and how to drive results. So can you share one of your most successful strategies that you did to achieve results? And I'd love it if you could share that, or if there's another one, but I think that's such a great story.
So I have to put you a little bit in context. So ever since I've been in sales, so whether it was in pharma or in retail, I was working in startup situations. So the pharmaceutical company was totally unknown, and worse than unknown, nobody wanted to buy it. And L'Occitane, when I took it over, was another totally unknown brand. And when I launched it, L'Occitane, actually, I based it out in BC. So it wasn't in Toronto, it wasn't in one of the big markets. And I've always been very strategic in my approach to what I do. I don't know why, it's in my nature. And I realized very quickly that when you launch an unknown brand, it's extremely difficult to get the public's attention on all your products at once.
Right.
So whether pharma, where you have a full range of products, or L'Occitane, where we had over 800 SKUs. So you can't have someone, very quickly when we opened our store, we realized that people were overwhelmed by everything we had in the store. You were overwhelmed by the colors, by the scents, and by the products.
Yeah.
So if you're overwhelmed, you're all in retail. You know what happens. If a client is overwhelmed, he leaves.
Yeah.
And I figured, oh my God, I'm competing against everyone, like whether it's Shoppers Drug Mart, Body Shop, Crabtree and Ebley, The Bay, Whole 20. I have no money for marketing. People are coming into my store and I'm not converting them. And granted, April, my job at L'Occitane was to convert. So I'm a major converter, which is what you need.
I think that's all of our challenge, right? In today's environment.
Yeah. Basically, when you're launching a startup, you need to convert as many people as possible, whether it's on one soap or one cream, it doesn't matter. You need to convert, which means you're working in width of clients and not in depth of clients.
Right.
Depth would be to add on and cross sell, but you don't do that in startup modes. Add on and cross sell, it's for later when your clients are starting to become loyal. So basically we had to convert, and you can only convert when you're able to get the client's attention. And when you have 800 SKUs, what do? Well, you look at your 800 SKUs and you tell yourself, what is the one product that is unique, that we own that product? It is so unique and has proven results that we're not really competing with anyone on it. And this is the product we're going to focus on. So to backtrack a little bit, you have to realize that I went from L'Occitane, from the pharmacy business. And where this strategy came from is because working in the pharmacy business, I had realized that people came in every week, sometimes twice a week.
Okay.
And I figured that unless I did something dramatically different, I wasn't going to survive in my little L'Occitane business. Nobody knew me. I didn't know anybody. It's as simple as that. And
Right.
to top it all, I was opening a fragrance and perfume store in a province that was known for its good scent. No scent is good sense. I was kind of stuck. So what did I do? I looked at my 800 SKUs and I looked to see if I had a product that could fulfill a pharmacy approach, which means I call it an essential. And we had one line, one range that was unique, the shea butter line. Nobody even knew what shea butter was, but that line was unique because it had a range of everyday products. It had triple milled soaps, hand cream, body lotion. I figured, okay, this is the brand I'm going to focus on, because if I create an essential, people will have reason to come back every week and show up at our store instead of only coming to see us during Christmas and Mother's Day.
Right. And I can relate to that because when I was selling tea, we were trying to make it a habit that somebody needed this tea to be able to sleep at night or to be able to have energy or whatever it was. It was like going after that one thing that could become a habit or like an essential in somebody's life, because then you can introduce them to everything else, right?
Exactly. Everything else becomes a natural add-on. So to continue on that vein, we basically realized that out of those essential products, for sure, soaps are essential, but soaps weren't differentiated enough, whereas the hand cream was. And if you flip the problem on its head, why do we need hand cream? Most of us, well, we need hand cream because our hands are dry.
Right.
We hate hand cream. Why? Why do we hate hand cream?
Why do we hate hand cream?
Because it's greasy.
Because it's greasy, yeah.
And because we need to reapply it every time we wash our hands.
Right.
And the beauty of L'Occitane hand cream is that it was super rich. It didn't stay greasy, and you didn't need to reapply it every time you wash your hand. So bingo, this was the product I was going to focus on. And it's a bit bizarre because how do you get someone who comes into a fragrance store to end up buying a hand cream? It's a whole approach that you have to be really, really subtle. However, it was very interesting. And why did I choose the hand cream? Because everybody needs hand cream, because it had a neutral scent. So both men and women could buy it indifferently. They could try it on in the store and immediately be convinced of its benefits. And cherry on the sundae, we had samples for the hand cream, which we could offer as they left the store, which took away the pressure of having to buy immediately.
Which makes me think about, like, when I was in the stores, or for many of you that are in the stores, or even if you're not and you have your own business, how to think about just selling in a way of like making something in your business like that necessity, as opposed to thinking about everything that you have to offer, but like zeroing and targeting down, which I think is when you come to staff training, when you have so many different product knowledge and so much information that we want to push down because this is the hottest thing this week and next week we want to sell this. But if you can stay true and really focused on one thing, the momentum that you can get from that thing can really launch your business and make it grow and make that brand be something, which I think you can relate to any way, shape, or form of selling any product, right? Like, I know that was, for us, was a big challenge because we had so many SKUs of tea. It was like, it's overwhelming for people. So I think that's a really good way of targeting, like a really good thought process of targeting it. And that's interesting how you took that from your medical background and brought that into retail, because maybe if you hadn't had that medical background, you wouldn't thought about it like that, right?
Yeah, it's exactly like some people would say, where did you get that idea? Honestly, I don't know. Like, my son is in retail. He works for a luxury brand, and he'll often ask me questions, and I'm like, Mom, how did you get to know that customer service was important? I said, I don't know. I've always been extremely picky about how people treated me when I came into stores. So when I went to create my strategies, I definitely didn't want to be treating others the way I hated to be treated myself. And it came mostly through observation and epidermic. You know, I don't like people talking to me like that. So why would I do that to them when they're coming into my store, you know?
Yeah. I'm just looking at the time and I'm looking at the chat. So Jane, is there any questions? I can't hear you. You're on mute. You're on mute. Could you unmute?
I know. Sorry about that. I just was sneezing. Okay, so we have a question here from Paul, who wants to know. Hang on, let me just get this one up. My thing's not working. Okay, what is your vision on best alternative sectors for career changes for luxury retail leaders who might want to change and explore?
That's the
question. I mean,
hold on. Can you
ask that question again? Can you repeat it?
What is your vision on the best alternative sectors for career changes for luxury retail leaders who might want to explore a new scenery? Okay. So if somebody's coming out as a manager from that, where are they going to go? What's the best sector for them to go into?
So to be honest, I mean, someone was asking me, like, I'm working on this Academy of Retail, and someone was saying, well, of course, Solange, you're going to do luxury. And I'm like, why? I'm like, excellence in retail doesn't only pertain to luxury. As far as I'm concerned, luxury should be even beyond excellence, and we shouldn't even have to discuss it, which we know is not always the case. But to answer your question, Paul, if you're someone who loves retail and has always wanted to reach excellence, and possibly that's why you've been working in luxury, I don't see any problem in moving to any sector which you're passionate about. I'll give you a couple of examples. for me, L'Occitane was deemed luxury because we positioned it that way, because of the stores, the fact that we were on Bloor Street. We were known as the Hermès of bath and beauty, but it's also because of my way of functioning. My standards are high, period. Like, no matter where I am, whether I was thinking of that this morning, actually, if I'm at Canadian Tire, I expect the same warmth, empathy, expertise about their products that I would if I go to Louis Vuitton. So to answer your question, find a product that you love and you're passionate about, and it's going to become your own luxury, and you're going to thrive in that. If you've been awesome in luxury, move on to Apple. Go sell Miele washing machines. I can sell Miele washing machines if you want. Go, you know, if you're really good at retail, go bring that service to anyone that you're passionate about, any brand that actually drives you.
And the other thing I was going to say, how I would answer that question would be, there's got to be things. I'm working with somebody right now because I'm a coach now as well, right? A leadership coach, and working with somebody that's in this place right now that doesn't know what to do with the next steps in their career, and is like, help me figure it out. And, you know, when I was having that moment 10 years ago, after being in retail for nearly 20 years, and I was like, you know, where do I want to go? What are my next steps? And I really figured out what I love to do was help leaders develop themselves, to develop teams, and create that place of where people feel valued. So I think you learn so many cross-functional skills being a retail leader, whether it's like you said, you're doing the retail academy now, which we'll get into in a bit, but you're building a retail academy. I've built retailu on the premise of my 25 years of experience and just loving developing leaders. And coaching and leadership development and training there's a big need for it. There's going to be a bigger need for it going back in, because we know the headcounts are going to be lower in head office. Training departments are getting cut. So I think it's like, you just have to think about what's the one thing that makes you get excited about why you're in retail. And if that's selling, like Solange said, go sell something else. If it's developing a team, you can do that anywhere. If it's helping find the best staff because you're really good at it and you're known as that person, then go do recruitment. I did recruitment for Apple for like nearly a year, and it was like my dream job. I got to give people their dream job. It was like I was Santa Claus, right? Like when I got to make that job offer. So I think you just have to find whatever you can. But there's so many cross-functional things, but coaching, leadership, training, selling different products, right? Yeah. Is there another question, Jane?
Yeah, we have another one from Sylvie, who's just popped off screen somewhere. So I don't know where she's gone, but she's a brand strategist working in retail. And she said, what do you think will help retailers keep their competitive edge in the time of this pandemic crisis?
Very good question. Very good question. Listen, I don't have God's descended knowledge in my head, but one thing that I had been noticed, I mean, COVID these days is just the culmination of all the challenges retail has been facing. And personally, I mean, you're going to find me pretty blunt, but I think the last 10 years have shown to us that retail had to change.
Yeah.
And one of my pet peeves, which has been a 20-year pet peeve, is the lack of consideration for front store staff. And from the day I launched L'Occitane, I made it a focus to ensure that not only my front store staff were the best possible in the industry, but also that they were paid really well, because in retail, 90% of staff actually still work in the stores. So the way I see it going forward is that the people who are going to survive are those who embrace the changes that were happening in the last 10 years. Personally, I got into online e-commerce in 2001. So I've been in online for a long time. So whatever the crisis we had to face, whether it was 9/11, SARS, and the financial crisis, we actually managed to pull through. I think for reasons that we've adapted, we embraced the change that were happening. We didn't, deny them. we knew that online was coming and it could only help make our business better. We were already customer centric. So today, everybody's talking about customer centricity. Don't you think as retailers, we should have been customer centric since the beginning? Isn't it all about the customer when you're in retail? And number three, the biggest challenge a lot of people are going to have today is the fact that they haven't considered their front store staff. As I was talking to another retail specialist the other day, she was like, Solange, it was just bodies. And I'm like, well, I am sorry to disagree. My front store staff are the most important people in the company.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the biggest challenge for the retailers who denied the fact that you need top of the line people working in your stores, because as we restrain the number of stores being opened, you're going to have better, more expert teams working in the stores, because today your customer is more expert than you are about your products. So that can't happen.
And I also think that people are going to make decisions based on how, I think now people have more, I don't know, insights, or will make judgments on brands based on the decisions that people have made through this time. Going back to that frontline staff, because I truly believe like they're the most important people. And I was that, you know, leader that would go into a store on a Saturday afternoon and hustle and like, you know, empty garbage cans or whatever I needed to do to be there for them. And that's what I loved about my job being in the stores. But I think compassion and making responsible decisions. This is something I was listening to this morning, and those two things really rung true, because when you think about your frontline staff, showing compassion to them and making responsible decisions as a business to make sure that they have what they need. And I think that whole necessity versus need, and we can't run stores without frontline staff. It's not possible. You can run stores without a vice president of sales and operations.
Yeah, you can, I mean, and
but you can't run stores without a store manager. So I think, you know, looking forwards, I think the retailers that will be successful will put that focus and that energy back on that frontline staff, which should have, like you said, Solange, should have always been there. The first 10 years of my career, I was measured 50% of my annual appraisal was based on what my staff said about me. So I was working for them. I wasn't working for me and for my customers. So it has to go back to that somehow. It has to swing back, right? So, okay, Jane, I'm just looking at time as well.
Yep. Yeah, we have another one from Ritesh here. He's talking about the luxury market and the best way to sell in the luxury market is not to sell at all. Kind of aired on this about the customer approach. And it's, but do you think the luxury market will see changes post-COVID?
So I think, well, one of the reasons, I mean, the luxury market has been fighting the whole changes to online since the beginning. I used to be on a panel where we would meet with all the CEOs of French companies, and I was head of the e-commerce, and I was told by luxury brands, which I will not name, Solange, we don't believe in online. So that was one of the biggest changes for online. The second thing in luxury, it's not true that we don't sell in luxury. It is that you to be able to actually create a buy as opposed to sell. So your job is actually to inform and educate and tell stories and inspire dreams and let the client make their own decision to buy. The changes that will be happening, I see it already happening today, is that the luxury brands that were extremely product focused have realized that now they need to change their approach and be people focused. And we're getting more and more demands for actually training store people, which was not really the case in the past. So good things are happening, I would say. And, you know, the ones who embrace those changes are the ones who are going to be winners in the long run.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, because we've had, people inquire about our training at retailu from luxury brands that in the past probably may not have, in it, like looking in a different way. So that's kind of interesting.
Exactly.
Okay, any other questions, Jane? Comments?
Does anybody wants to ask anything? Either April or Solange.
I mean, I have a question as well. Like, so when you think about, you talked about staff, right? Like, and I know now we're going to get to what you're working on now, but like, how did you make sure? Because what I remember about L'Occitane going into it was, how did you make sure that your store staff were fully competent? Because that's a real challenge in retail. Like, it's a real challenge to get them the information, to get them trained, like to get them like just information. And people always asking me, how do you get all the information to the store staff? Like, it's really challenging, right? So how did you make sure that they were competent and trained?
So yeah, it is a challenge. And to be honest, I'm not sure at the time I really mastered it, but one of my favorite things to do is to develop people. So even though I was the CEO of the company, I remained the chief training officer. And you know what? It takes a lot of time and effort. So the first thing is to set high standards. So you only hire people who are willing to rise to the challenge and who want to learn. Because my motto is always, if you stop learning, you die. So we hire people that want to be challenged, and then you train. So we developed training programs that we refined as we went, because we realized that to train 2, 3 stores, it works. 4, 5, 6 stores, it's starting to be difficult. So we made our training more and more concise and direct and to the point with the basics. And we trained people to use their own common sense and their own knowledge to expand it the way they want it. Like, we don't have, for example, like some companies will say we have, how do they call it? A selling ceremony.
A selling model. Yeah, lots of people have selling models.
Yeah, we don't have any selling ceremony because each client is individual. Each approach is individual, so you can't make it into a 5-step ceremony. However, we trained them and gave them the values that made them that whatever ceremony they did in the store, it matched the values of the company. And you basically are training on an ongoing basis. So personally, I'm very similar to you, April. I was known to basically be in the stores every Saturday, every Friday. I had my apron on. Nobody knew who I was because I never advertised it. I never had my face in magazines, so nobody knew who I was. And I was actually working with the team in the stores, training. And to be honest, you're gonna laugh, but most people would die to know when the CEO was coming, because they knew that if I came, they would probably do 25% over objectives in their sales, and they would be learning crucial tips from me directly. So, you know, there's no way around it. You need to train until your staff starts training you, and then it becomes really interesting.
Yeah, we were having this discussion the other day about, like, you know, I'm one of these people that if I go into a retailer, I start pulling all the checklists away, like getting rid of all those selling checklists and observation things, because I'm truly a believer that if you really love helping customers, you're in the right place. And if you really don't, I can train you and I can give you the fundamentals, but you got to really want to help people. And instead of leaders, when they go and do store visits, stepping back and doing a checklist and observing, what we should be doing is going in and working with them to help them, and not getting stuck in it so that you can't, you know, take a step back and be objective, but like going in and showing them. It's a big key success factor of most retail leaders when they're in stores, is going in and doing it with people and showing them and being approachable that way, as opposed to standing back with a checklist, right? Like I rip checklists up. People are like, no,
well, I mean, you all know the expression lead by example. So it's very simple. If I want them to be enthusiastic and treat the clients with the utmost care, I have to show them. I don't have a choice. If I arrive late at the store, my staff will arrive late. It's as simple as that. So if they hear me talk to a client in a certain way, they'll imitate. it's, you know.
Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing another question. Jane, there's another question.
Yeah, there's one here from Jeremy. It's how do you balance compliance needs, which are going to be likely exasperated with the cleaning regimes that's going to be needed post-COVID, with coaching time and training time?
That's a really good question. I think that there is going to be a requirement, there's definitely going to be different requirements. I know I've been talking to operations retail leaders that are starting to craft new policies on what it's going to look like to function in a store. It was happening slightly before, but it's going to come back with that balance. And it's like anything, right? Like it's something that you have to get done in your day. So I think that whereas we had, you know, people had the way that they structured their day before, whether they had a midday walkthrough, whether they had an opening checklist, a closing checklist, whether they had a task management system where they had to complete things online and comply. I think that is going to just have to be even more heightened, even more detail on it. And I'm sure all retailers are kind of crafting that right now. I think that's interesting in terms of what we have learned at retailu in the last 3 weeks of being in this bubble is that, believe it or not, a lot of retail people have joined retailu and are doing the development on their own time which, you know, I'm not an advocate of, but like I'm certainly didn't get to my career from doing Monday to Friday, 40 hours a week, right? I got to where I was in my career because I was willing to do the learning and the education on top of my job to get to where I was. I didn't go to university. I took leadership courses throughout the course of me becoming where I was. And this is how retailu kind of evolved. So I think, and so, what was interesting is some people were very nervous about people that work in retail, the frontline staff, having apps and things on their phone that are accessible to them outside of their normal working hours. But what we've come to quickly realize with all of the Zoom calls that are happening, with people joining retailu to take the training, that's really an obstacle in our own minds as the leaders of the business. And we've kind of got to get that aside so that we can make things accessible in terms of training and development when they want to use it and consume it. So I think the barriers of like, you can only do this when you're in the store, training and coaching and development, is going to change somewhat. And I think that they should be able to have access to that outside of their four walls or outside of their shift if the tasks become so heavy. However, like Solange said, if you have a present store leader, store manager that's in that store that is trained to train people well, then I think that store manager is going to have to take more ownership and be more responsible for training and development and be able to have those skills to do it. And I think that's what we focus on at retailu. We focus on developing leaders to be able to develop leaders. And I think that just becomes part of what you do every day. Like training and development to me is not something that you schedule time for training classes, but development happens every day, all day in conversations, right? Let me tell you, you know, like for an example, like tell me what you know, your thought process is on this, and then I'll tell you mine. That's a mentorship moment right there. You're walking away with something. And I think we need to be more conscientious of that, especially store managers when they go back into the business. So it's a really good question. I think it's going to be a question that people if you work in retail right now and you're running store and ops, I would take that question away right now, copy and paste it and put it on your next conference call. I
can add to that. It's COVID is definitely going to change a lot of things for the cosmetics and makeup industry, where you had testers everywhere. And, you know, we already had hygiene rules that were extremely strict because I came from the medical field. So we had samples, which a lot of cosmetic companies didn't have. Now I think it's going to become the norm. It's going to be, compulsory to follow those strict hygiene rules. And it's not a bad thing, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. So I'm just looking at time. Is there any other questions, Jane?
No, just to add to that, I mean, obviously we all know that retail is going to be different post-COVID. And, you know, whereas the journey was always getting to know people, this is what Steve is just quickly touching on here. It's like I said, the makeup industry are doing it, have started doing this, you know, no testers. how is it going to look? Are we with social distancing, which could probably continue even after we open? How is that actually going to look in a store situation? Are we just going to stand behind the cash and let them just do? Or
well, here's the thing on that, right? We're living first-time experiences right now. We're making first-time decisions right now. I remember the first 3 days when we were on calls, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, making decisions about closing stores and how long we were going to close them for. And I was on multiple calls with different businesses, and we were making first-time decisions. And we were like, how do you do that? You build that resilience and that agility and that ability to manage rapid change. And so that's why I'm so passionate about leadership development, because we are in the midst of it. We don't know what it's going to look like. We can play out 3 different models and think about different scenarios. And if you do that, you might have 80% of the answer, but you'll have 20% of I don't know, because none of us know, right? So creating strong communication, strong partnerships with other people outside of your 4 walls, which is what these coffee chats can do as well, can help you gather that information from other people to make more informed decisions. But at the end of the day, we don't know what that's going to look like. I mean, I just going into a grocery store with somebody with a plexiglass, that's foreign, that's new. It's like, whoa, this is like being in a movie. This is real. We don't know what's going to happen. So I think, but at the end of the day, stay positive, stay persistent, stay agile, you know, and keep your network, keep your network there so you can pull on other people's what they're doing and help each other with those decisions. That was what I got out of those 3 days. Everybody was helping each other with those decisions because it was first time making those decisions, you know? Okay, I'm just looking at time. Anything else? No, we're good? All right, because I want to keep it not too long, short and sweet. A nice little coffee break. So, Solange, what are you working on right now? I'd love you to share that with everybody because that's super exciting.
So my entire career has been about ensuring that front store staff were properly trained. And one of the biggest surprise, I keep moving rooms because I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. There's some gardener outside my house. Sorry about that. So the noise is like ridiculous. So you're going to see every room in my house. Soon I'm going to go in the bathroom.
Getting a tour of Solange Strom's house. I love these coffee chats.
I know. One of the biggest surprises I had when I arrived in retail, you guys are going to laugh, is I realized people could not sell. They actually were just there to man the tills, but they actually didn't know what conversion even meant. So I created my training program to actually teach them how to sell while they were not selling, okay? We agree that we're selling, but nobody realized we're selling. We called that creating the desire to buy. And once I had this high standard of you're actually full-fledged members of this society, you will not ever tell me I'm just a sales girl, which to be honest, I am a sales girl and I'm pretty proud about it. So please do not ever tell me that you're just a sales girl. I figured that with the changes happening in retail, the most important people are our front store staff. Now, I've always believed that, but most retailers didn't. And that's why I decided to I'm working on some visionary, project. I'm wanting to build a retail academy of excellence.
Love it.
Basically, train the best of the best people for the future retail of 2030. So I'm not saying it's a small feat. I'm starting small, which means I'm building retail excellence programs for current people that are in retail, which have high standards and want to develop their people. And we're hoping that within 5 years, we actually have a full-fledged academy which will give back its badge of honor to retail. Retail, I mean, you'll ask me, do you think retail is for everyone? And I'll answer you, absolutely not. Retail, first of all, is a career that is not easy. It's not for everyone. You can't tell me I'm doing retail because I have nothing else to do. Retail is a real career.
Yeah.
And because it's a real career, we need people who have a real retail education. And that's what I want to do for the future.
I can't wait to see that happen. I'll be like so excited about that. It's 1:51, so we're going to start wrapping up. I think we got to everybody's questions, Jane, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So I just want to say thank you, Solange. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing your words of wisdom. Thanks for sharing what's coming up on the roadmap for you. That's very exciting. And thank you to all of you for your questions and your comments. And, you know, hopefully we'll do this again next week. Who knows who's going to be on next week? But I just appreciate everybody showing up. And hopefully you got something fun out of it. You got to see our smiling faces. And at the end of the day, we're all going to get through this. We're going to get through it stronger, better together. And I think, did you get?
Exactly. Question.
Yeah. We do have like a recording of this as well, and we're going to be able to post them and share it with you guys if you're interested. But follow us at retailu. That's all I have to say for today, really. I just think stay positive.
Question, April?
Yeah. What did you say?
I was reading on the chat. Someone was asking if their question was answered.
I think it did get answered. Yeah, it was just, well, I think Sylvia got up, but it did get answered. So I hope that I hope this was fun, and stay positive, and you know, take this time to do something new or exciting. I'm gonna start learning to play the piano again, I think, because
Yeah, I think it's a thank you so much, everyone. You know, my son is in retail, and that's what I told him. Use this time to learn skills that you don't have. He's taking some online course to learn how to do Power BI because he loves retail. He wants to get into operations. So, you know, whatever the future has for us, prepare yourself for it. Do stuff that you want to do. Don't waste your time, because we do have a lot of time on our hands. Don't waste it, use it appropriately, and let's keep developing retail together.
Awesome. All right. So with that, have a great week, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay safe.